Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered, why is my belly still here even after I've lost weight? If that sounds familiar, you're not imagining things because the most dangerous fat in your body isn't always the fat you can pinch. It's the fat you can't see. Hidden deep inside your abdomen is something called visceral fat, a type of fat that wraps around your liver, pancreas, stomach, and other vital organs. Unlike the fat just beneath your skin, visceral fat is metabolically active, meaning it can interfere with how your body works every single day. Over time, excess visceral fat has been linked to a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, heart disease, and several other chronic health conditions. Here's the encouraging news. Visceral fat is often one of the first types of fat your body begins to lose when you make the right lifestyle changes. And in today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to target it. We'll cover the best science backed foods, the most effective drinks, and the simple exercises that burn the most visceral fat without spending hours in the gym. Let's begin with your diet because every meal you eat is either helping your body reduce visceral fat or making it easier for that fat to stick around. One group of nutrients deserves special attention. They're called carotenoids. You may not recognize the name, but you've probably eaten them hundreds of times. They're the natural plant compounds that give carrots their bright orange color, tomatoes their vibrant red, sweet potatoes their rich orange, and spinach its deep green color. But carotenoids do much more than make vegetables colorful. They act as powerful antioxidants, helping protect your cells from oxidative stress, a process that can contribute to chronic inflammation and metabolic dysfunction, both of which are associated with excess visceral fat. Research also suggests that carotenoids may help support healthy fat metabolism by influencing how the body stores and uses fat. One particularly interesting randomized double-blind clinical trial from Japan examined whether increasing carotenoid-rich vegetables could affect visceral fat. After 8 weeks, participants who regularly consumed carotenoid-rich vegetables experienced reductions in visceral fat, with the greatest improvement seen in one of the higher lycopene dietary groups. Importantly, all of the groups eating carotenoid-rich vegetables showed positive changes, suggesting that regularly including these foods may support a healthier body composition as part of an overall balanced diet. So, what should you actually eat? The answer is surprisingly simple. Fill your plate with colorful vegetables like carrots, tomatoes, bell peppers, spinach, sweet potatoes, squash. The more natural color on your plate, the more likely you're getting a variety of beneficial carotenoids. And this is just the beginning, because the next food I'll show you may be even more effective for reducing stubborn belly fat, and it's something many people already have in their kitchen without realizing how powerful it can be. Let's keep going. Any colorful vegetable or fruit is likely to be rich in some type of carotenoid, and it will help you lose your visceral fat. Now, after carotenoids, another special compound that you need to target is cacans. And these are flavonoid polyphenols, which also act like antioxidants, and they reduce inflammation. Now, my favorite way to get cacans is by drinking green tea. And you hear it all the time, green tea burns fat. And it does. And it does so because it's rich in cacans. These compounds basically change how your body handles fat, and specifically visceral fat. And cacans help with fat regulation in so many different ways. So, first, cacans boost your fat oxidation and energy expenditure. So, they stimulate the nervous system just to burn up more fat and boost your overall metabolism. And on top of that, cacans also inhibit fat processing enzymes like lipase. So, they block fat that we eat from being absorbed in the first place. And the reason green tea is so powerful is green tea also contains caffeine, which can work synergistically with cacans to enhance that fat utilization or fat burning. And there was a double blind placebo control randomized trial in Japan that showed that just 12 weeks of drinking caffeine enriched green tea, which was about 600 milligrams of cacans per day, resulted in a significant reduction in visceral fat. Now, just remember, most green teas are high in cacans, but to really maximize the benefit, you want to target green teas that are minimally processed. So those would be matcha or sena teas. Now, in the grand scheme of things, anything that leads to an energy deficit or a calorie deficit will help you lose weight and it will help you lose visceral fat. But targeting these right foods and drinks will help you get there much faster. And once you've dialed in the right foods, the correct exercise regimen will become that magical multiplier. In fact, the correct type of exercise is a big must when it comes to losing visceral fat quickly. And we have studies like this meta analysis of 117 studies that show that even though both diet and exercise can reduce visceral fat, diet has a larger effect on total body weight loss, while exercise tends to have superior effects on reducing visceral fat. And there's an older but a very interesting study that showed just how powerful small dose of exercise can be. So, in this study, just two 45-minute cycling sessions per week at 75% of the V2 peak for 2 months reduced visceral fat by 48%. So, almost half in just 2 months. And not only that, but this group also improved insulin sensitivity by 41% and lost 18% of subcutaneous fat. And this wasn't strenuous exercise by any means that they had to do twice a week. What they did in the study was they measured the intensity as V2 peak as opposed to V2 max. So it's hard to tell exactly what 75% looked like for that average participant. But since the people in the study were likely not professional athletes, I assume their V2 peak was lower than their V2 max or zone 3 range, or about 70 to 80% of maximum heart rate. So this exercise would actually put them in the low moderate intensity. It's that intensity where you can still hold the conversation and speak in full sentences, but you just sound a little winded. And another interesting trend that we see from those studies is that the total body weight stayed about the same. So remarkable changes in dropping their visceral fat and improving their insulin sensitivity, even though there are no measurable changes on the scale. And this is such an important point that I always talk about with my patients. Do not get discouraged if you're doing all the right things when it comes to nutrition and movement and proper exercise, but the weight is just not coming off. More often than not, the scale is a pretty poor indicator of your progress because the number on the scale does not necessarily show the changes in your body composition and loss of fat mass. Now, what's the best type of exercise that will help you lose visceral fat and it will help you do it fast? Well, a recent systematic review and meta analysis that looked at 84 randomized control trials showed that it's the vigorous intensity aerobic exercise and high intensity interval training, or HIT, that are the most effective exercise modalities for reducing visceral fat. And resistance training was still beneficial, but just not as effective when looking specifically at visceral fat reduction. And that's not to say forget about resistance training. In fact, resistance training is a must for maintaining your muscle mass, and it's important for your overall health and your metabolism. But if you want to lose visceral fat fast, like over the next few months, it's probably better to dial up your cardio. Now, if we're choosing between HIT and aerobic exercise, there really isn't a big difference between the effectiveness. The studies that look at direct comparisons show that both modalities are very similar with no statistically significant difference between the two in adults. Now, if you really want to dig into the data and the literature, there may be a small signal that when it comes to HIIT exercises, you may get a little bit more effectiveness with running as opposed to cycling. And there's some studies that show that in kids and young adults under the age of 24, HIT may be more effective than aerobic exercise. But honestly, we're just splitting hairs at this point. At the end of the day, the way I see it, it doesn't matter if you do high intensity interval training or if you do aerobic exercise, or whether for cardio you choose to do cycling or running or rowing or dancing. The best exercise is the one you'll actually stick with because consistency beats the perfect plan every time. So that textbook perfect hit protocol that you just dread and you only do twice a month is always going to lose out to that walk that you enjoy and are able to do several times a week consistently. And the ideal protocol, at least based on the studies that are available, would probably be an exercise that you can do at least 2 to 3 times a week for at least 45 minutes each. And whatever you choose, it just has to be at least moderate to vigorous intensity, meaning you're getting your heart rate to about 70 to 80% of your maximum capacity. And if you're not into measuring or tracking your heart rate, a good rule of thumb is to do a talk test. You're doing a moderate intensity activity if you can talk in full sentences, but you sound a little out of breath. And you're doing vigorous intensity exercise if you can only speak in a few words before pausing and taking a breath. And the beautiful thing about exercise is the fact that the effects that you get are dose dependent, meaning the more you do, the better are the results. One of the most encouraging findings comes from a study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. Researchers found that people who exercised more consistently or at a higher intensity generally experienced greater reductions in visceral fat. Here's what surprised many people. The same pattern wasn't seen with calorie restriction alone. In other words, there's only so much benefit you get from eating less. After a certain point, cutting more calories doesn't necessarily lead to greater visceral fat loss, and it can leave you feeling tired, hungry, and make it harder to stick with your plan. That's why starving yourself is not the answer. Instead, focus on eating enough nutritious food to maintain a modest calorie deficit while gradually increasing your physical activity over time. Even something as simple as adding a daily walk, incorporating strength training a few times a week, or increasing the intensity of your workouts can make a meaningful difference. Remember, you didn't gain visceral fat overnight, and you don't have to lose it overnight either. Small, consistent habits repeated every day are what lead to lasting results. So, starting today, challenge yourself to make just one healthy change. Maybe it's adding more colorful vegetables to your plate. Maybe it's taking a 20-minute walk after dinner. Or maybe it's replacing one sugary snack with a healthier option. Those small choices add up faster than you might think. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more science backed tips on healthy aging, nutrition, and lasting weight loss. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you. What's one habit you're going to start this week to reduce stubborn belly fat? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can, and your stories often inspire future videos. Thanks for watching, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next video.